cases, Gemara and Yevamos, Daf Chof Tes. All the learning should bring an incredible schos Yeshuais, schos Shidduch for Yisrael Chaim and Devar Tamar Tzipa. Bas apparel Rachel Shimon and Bizavo Vigmentali Shimon Chaya Bluma Yudis Bas Sima Malka. They should all find their Shidduch and Bekarav, as well as learning should be a schos for Shleima. Shol Yosef and Yevei the Shmom and Tilam Tazim Mechles and Nachama Bas Shiva Beserva Figo Shirchanas or Bluma Bas Mindol Azara Bas Kilo Besoich Sha'ar Chayli Yisrael. And we are holding towards the bottom of Chav Chesam and Beis, and we begin a new Mishnah. Says the Mishnah Shleishach. We have three brothers, Shleim and the Suyush Achayus, and of course, as very often the cases are, two of the brothers are married to two sisters. Oy, or Isha Ubita, or two of the brothers are married to a mother and her daughter. Oy, Isha Ubaspita, or two of the brothers are married to a daughter and a granddaughter. Or Isha Ubasbina, or two of the brothers are married to a daughter, to a woman and the granddaughter from the son. Hare elu Concise v'loy misya bamos. In all these cases, no yibum is allowed, only chalitz. And of course, you realize that the common theme is that the two women in question are ervos to each other. We have two sisters, mother, daughter, mother, granddaughter, etc. And therefore, in these cases, when they fall to Yibum, there's no potential Yibum because of the potential Isser Erva. And therefore, what is the din? The din is that you have to do chalitza, and not yibum. But Rav Shimon Baiter, Rav Shimon says in this case, unique din, there you don't do anything, not even chalitza. And we'll see in the Gemara exactly why. We've seen many times, if one of them is an Isser Erva, so if it's a proper Erva, not that the two women in question are related, but there's an Issa Erva between the person that the Yibum is falling to and her, so they cannot get married. So the Issa Erva dissolves that Zika, and of course we know that the halacha is Aser Ba Umutter Ba Chaisa. Then you're allowed to get married. You're allowed to do Yibum to the other sister. Isser Mitzvah, Isser Kedusha. If the relation between the potential Yevama and the potential Yavam is only an Isser Dirabanan, Isser Mitzvah, Isser Kedusha, Concise, what is the halacha? You do chalitza and not yibum. Of course, Reuben and Shimon are married to Rachel and Leah. What happens when Reuben and Shimon are nifter and therefore they fall? Rachel and Leah falls the yibum to Levi. What is the halacha? Said the Mishnah, the halacha is that the Levi has to chalitza and not yibum. Whereas Rav Shimon argues, Rav Shimon says that they're a potter from chalitza from the yibum. And in the picture over here, it incorporates the Gemara that we'll see in one moment. Where does Rav Shimon say you're a potter? Rav Shimon learns it out from a pasuk of Isha lachaisa loisikach litzrar. And from there, Rav Shimon learns that whenever they're going to become sarei zu lezu, the Zika itself disallows. So the double Zika from sisters, Rachel and Leah, falling Leibim to Levi, that itself disallows Levi from doing anything according to Rav Shimon. The Mishnah continues that what happens if Rachel and Leah, so if they're an Isser Erva, as you see in the bottom right, then Aser Ba Umutter Ba Chaisa. For example, if Leah was Levi's daughter, so Levi would not be able to marry Leah, but then Levi can marry Rachel. However, if it's Itzer Misr, it's Kedusha, like Shnias Arayis. If it's a Derabanan, Levi and Leah, then Levi would, yes, be able to marry. Then Levi, would have to chalitza and not yibam to Rachel. So says the Gemara, they didn't Rav Shimon like we just saw. Tani, we learned in the Rayo Rav Shimon Baiter b'Shneim min chalitza min yibam. Rav Shimon says there's a betur from chalitza and yibam. Says the Gemara, where does Rav Shimon know this from? Shenemar, as the Torah teaches us, v'ishal chaysa l'sikach litzrar. The pasuk says that a woman and her sister, you should not marry them to make them litzrar, to make them rivals. Let's point out that Pashim Shad in this pasuk is just teaching you that you can't marry two sisters. Rav Shimon takes it one step further. Not only can you not marry two sisters, says Rav Shimon, but bisha shenasu sarai zulazu. If even they are only tzarais, and even they only fall to even to each other, still says Rav Shimon that itself patters. You cannot even marry one of them, and that is the sheet of Rav Shimon. That is Rav Shimon why he holds when Rachel and Leah fall to Yibum, the act of falling to Yibum itself is enough to pater them from Yibum and Chalitza. Says the Gemara further 3 lines from the bottom of Chesem and Beis, Hoisachas Mehem, it's a Erva, it's a Kedusha, Asulamali. Says the Gemara, why in the world do we need this case? We already learned this din. Answers the Gemara, Rav Shimon Hitzrich. No. And of course, that was the Chiddush of our Mishnah. The Chiddush of our Mishnah was Rav Shimon. So it says the Gemara, the second case is also necessary. Why is it also necessary? Because you would have thought, since Rav Shimon in case 1 in the Mishnah said there's no Chalitza, no Yibam. Why not? Because of Shimon held that the act of falling to Yibam of sisters bothers you. So you would think, Ligzer Mishum Beizachayos. So maybe in a case of Isser Shniyos, maybe in a case of Isser Mitzvah, Isser Kedusha, even though it's only a Derabanan. But you would think, according to Rav Shimon, maybe there's a Gezira D'Alma, Kamash Malan, that even according to Rav Shimon, there is no Gzeira. And then the Mishnah continued, and the Mishnah said that what is the din? What is the din of Isser Mitzvah, the Isser Kedusha? Excuse me, I think I went backwards. Yeah. This is the case of Isser Mitzvah, Isser Kedusha. The previous part of the Gemara was when there's an Isser Erva, the halach is Asr Ba Mutar Ba'achaisa. So the Gemara was pointing out that you would have thought that according to Rav Shimon, there should be a Gzeira D'Rabbanan, not even allowing you to marry the sister. Says the Gemara, no, actually, let's just, I think there is a Rashi here. 1 second. Yeah, let's just point out for one moment the last Rashi and Amr before we continue. I know it's getting late. Says Rashi, really we knew this from the Reisha. Aval, and here's the lie. L'Rav Shimon the Amar Isser Achai Zikuka Erva Gimura, because Rav Shimon held that the mere fact of falling liyibam of 2 sisters, that itself is enough to pater. Why? Because Rav Shimon holds that the Isser Achai Zikuka is an Erva Gimura. He learned that from the Torah. So because of that, you would think in Rav Shimon it should go one step further. Last line in Rashi, when one is in his erba, maybe you think you can't even do yibum. Because you don't want them to come to yibum in a regular case. Kamash malan, the Rav Shimon does not make such a gzeira. Says the Gemara Isser Mitzvah. So now we're going in the third case of the Mishnah. Ask the Gemara as we turn over to Chavtesam and Aleph. Rav Shimon, and this of course follows the previous Gemara, as the Gemara just taught us. The Gemara just taught us that Rav Shimon's Shita is not isolated to case 1. We have 3 cases in the Mishnah. Shimon Shita, we have the sisters, we had Isser Erva, and now we have Isser Mitzvah, Isser Kedusha. So we saw from the previous Gemara that Rav Shimon Shita is not isolated to case 1. It follows through to case 2, it follows through to case 3. So says the Gemara, Rav Shimon says that 2 sisters, there's no chalitza, there's no yibam. So says the Gemara, in our case as well, of Isser Mitzvah, Isser Shniyos, why doesn't Rav Shimon say the same thing? Answers the Gemara, like the Hava Mina a moment ago, Gezira Misham Isser Mitzvah, the Alma. The reason why Rav Shimon over here does, yes, require Chalitza, because of the potential of Isser Mitzvah, in a regular case. Says the Gemara, this makes sense, she herself. I understand that why she has the requirement of chalitza, but for the sister, why does the sister require a chalitza? Says Gemara, another gzeira. Gzeira achayisa misham lesa dida. We make a gzeira on the sister that she needs a chalitza, because in the case when one has an Isser Mitzvah itself, that if the sister didn't require chalitza, people might think that even when there's an Isser mitzvah, there is no chalitza. Ask the Gemara about Garbi Eberlo gets Rinon. The Kasha, again, we case A, B, and C. Case A, two sisters, Hashem said everyone's potter. Case B, the case of Araba, no Gzeira. Case C, the case of Isser mitzvah, Isser Kedusha, yes Gzeira. So we just finished explaining why in case 3, Isser mitzvah, Isser Kedusha, there's a Gzeira. But so now, Frek the Gemara, go back to case 2. Why is there a Gzeira as well? Says the Gemara, there's a fundamental difference between erva and mitzvah and kedusha. Shiny erva, the migmar gemiri la inshi v'kolis. Everyone knows about it. Everyone knows the halacha. Then erva is potter from chalitza. There's no potential misconstruing this halacha, and there is a call about this, and therefore there is no concern at all. And now we continue to a new Mishnah. It says the Mishnah Chavtes Amar Aleph Shleisha Achim, 3 brothers, Shteim then Tzuya Shtei Achayos. 2 brothers are married to 2 sisters, Ve'echad Mufna, and one of them, the 3rd brother, is single. He's not married to anyone. Meis Echad Mibali Achayos. So Reuven and Shimon, or Shimon, dies. V'asaba Mufna Mimer. Now Levi, the single brother, does Mimer. So far, so good. Then Shimon dies. So we have a Levi who did Mimer, Kedushin Derabanan, Erusin, to, we'll call it Ruvain's wife, Rachel. Now Shimon's wife, Leah, falls to Yibam to Levi. So what does Levi do right now? Because Levi, on one hand, did a Kedushin Derabanan to this sister. But on the other hand, it was only Kedusha in the Rabbanan. So says the Gemara, it's Machlekes Beis Shammai Beis Hillel. Beis Shammai Oimrim Ishtay Imoi, says Beis Shammai, his wife is with him. What wife? The wife in which he did Mimer to. That wife that he did Kedusha the Rabbanan is with him. And this other wife, Leah, leaves. Nothing, no yibum, no chalitza, nothing. Why? Because it's a form of achayzisha. Of course, not a real achayzisha because he's not really married. He only did it to Erisin, as we're going to see. Obviously, Beis Shammai is going. That mimer affects a lot. No, beget ubechalitza. Levi has to go, and the woman in which he did mimer to Kedush Rabbanan needs 2 things: get to get rid of the mimer, chalitza to get rid of the original Zika, ve'isha's achiv, and the other wife, Shimon's wife, bechalitza needs chalitza. And Zuisha Amru, and this din of Beis Hillel, which we said, Oilai al ishtay v'oilai al isha as achiv. So let's go. And let's see this case in picture. Again, dafachayim.org, an incredible resource. They made all these pictures available to everyone. How incredible. So here we see over here, on the left side of your screen, Shleisha Achim, with 3 brothers, Reuven and Shimon. Levi is single. Reuven dies. Levi does Mimer, Kedusha the Rabbanan to Rachel. And then Shimon dies. What is the status to Leah? That is the discussion. You see on the right side of your screen, it's really a machlekes Beis Shammai Beis Hillel. Beis Shammai says, Levi is married to Rachel 100%, no problems, no anything. So much so that Leah needs 0. Nothing, not chalitza, not yibum. It's as if she's a regular achos ishtai, that her sister is married to Levi. And of course, it points out over here that Mimer, according to Beis Shammai, is a kinim in hatayra, and therefore it's a full-fledged marriage. Beis Hillel says no, he needs to get double nailed. That's what the Gemara says. Says Beis Hillel, you got to do to Rachel, get rid of her with Ken and Chalitza. To Leah, get rid of her with Chalitza. And as the Gemara will point out, that according to Beis Hillel, Mimer is a kidding derabanan. Why? Because in Torah you have the original Zika, you have the original Yevamos sitting there, and that's what you need chalitza for. Now let's see the Gemara. Says the Gemara, Zui lemute mai, the classical kasha. What did the Mishnah say? The Mishnah ended off and said on Beis Hillel, Zui, this is in which we said, so whenever we say Zu, this, that comes to exclude something else. So what's it coming to exclude? Says the Gemara, lemute ha. It's telling us that we do not go with Rabbi Yeshua, rather we go with Elai Kirav Gamliel or Kiravi Elazar. Now the Gemara itself does not quote this case. Rashi, of course, Rashi sends us Rashi sends us to the Gemara later in Parak Beis Shammai. But over here we see the picture in which we're coming to exclude this din of Rav Yeshua, and we're saying either like Rav Elazar or like Rav Gamliel. And this is, the top half of this picture really is going to flow straight into the next Gemara. Zui Shamro Ela Ishtal Ishtal Chalachiv. Beis Shammai says Ishtay Mavalozu Teitzei. Here you see that it's basically just showing us the picture of Beis Hillel again. That according to Beis Hillel, what does Levi have to do? Levi has to go and give Yibam and Chalitza to Leah. Chalitza and Gat and Chalitza to Rachel. And here it says according to Beis Hillel, that's what happens. This is showing us that we're going with the opinion of Rabbi Yeshua, and rather, we do not go with Rabbi Yeshua, rather we go with Rabbi Gamliel or Rabbi Elazar. Actually, this picture has absolutely no sheiches. Apologies, this is the next Gemara. But really what's going on over here, this is the Mishnah on Koftes. And in that Mishnah, we're showing our Gemara that the fact that only in this case we go with Beis Hillel shows us that we are not going with Rabbi Yeshua, because Rabbi Yeshua over there saw another case in which Rabbi Yeshua says, as you see in Rashi, this is what we should have read the first time, and Rav Gamliel and Rav Elazar argues, so our Mishnah is showing us that we're going with Rav Yeshua, not Rav Gamliel and Rav Elazar. Okay, that picture we just saw, that's going to be the next Gemara, so let's go. Omar Rav Elazar, do not say what we're all thinking. We're all thinking that what's the machlekes Beis Shammai Beis Hillel? We think very simply, Beis Shammai must hold Mimer is a full kinyan. Beis Hillel must hold Mimer is not a full kinyan. According to Beis Shammai, it's a full kinyan, and therefore, when the next brother dies, what happens? Nothing. You're fully married. According to Beis Hillel, it's not. Says Rav Elazar, do not say that. Do not say that Mimer, according to Rabbi Shammai, is Kunigim Gomer. And then let's say one who does a Mimer would want to subsequently divorce that woman. All they would need is a get. Says Rabbi Elazar, no. What does the Mimer do? It only is the bearer to push away the tzara. That's all it has the power to do, in which the Mishnah by us it was doing. Our Mishnah did not show us that Mimer was absolute. All it showed us that it has the power to push away the tzara. And Amar Rav Avin, Afana Nami Tinina. We'll bring back up that picture in a moment. But says Rav Avin, we see this in a Mishnah. It says Rav Avin, that says the following. Beis Shammai oimrim yikaimu. Beis Shammai says, in a case we have two sisters, two brothers, and what happens, it's really 4 brothers, 2 sisters, and they fell to the 2 brothers, the classical 4 and 2 case, and now the wives fall to the 2 brothers. What happens if the brothers went and did Yibum? Beis Shammai oimrim yikaimu. What does yikaimu mean? You're allowed to stay married. From those words we see yikaimu in lechatchila noi. We see that lechatchila you can't marry those 2 brothers. As we turn over to Chavtas Beis, and now Rav Avin articulates his Rayo. And if you're going to tell that according to Beis Shammai, when Mimer is done, it's 100% a kinyan. So says the Gemara, if a Mimer was a Kinyan Gomer, so why would we say that according to Beis Shammai, only b'di'evet, if you did Yibum, it works? Why don't we say, do Mimer? And Mimer will allow it to work. Let's see this inside. It's a little bit of a difficult concept to understand. Here we have our case of our Mishnah. Again, Reuben, Shimon, Levi, Reuben and Shimon die, leaving Rachel and Leah to Levi. What did Beis Hillel teach us? And Beis Shammai said, no, he stays married. Said Rav Elazar, what did Beis Shammai mean? Do not say that Beis Shammai meant that's a kinyan gomer. Don't say that. Again, the top picture here is showing Beis Shammai, that according to Beis Shammai, Levi stays married to Leah. Says the Gemara, don't say that. Why? If Levi would want a divorce, really, you need a get and a chalitza. But rather, Mimer leBei Shammai, all it does is it pushes away the tzara, and it doesn't aser because of achos zikuka. So what does the Mimer accomplish? Mimer accomplishes that when Mimer is done, it's no longer achos zikuka. Achos zikuka is an iser. Again, let's remind yourself, we've seen this many times. Achos zikuka is a Rachel and Leah because the fact that they're sisters and they have a Zika, this connection to the Yevamos, that itself makes there an iser. Says the Gemara, if a Levi goes and does a Mimer to Rachel, what happens? The Mimer, the Kedushin Derabanan, comes along and pushes away the iser to Leah, which if you think about it for a moment, is a fascinating chiddush, because a moment before Levi's sitting there and he has two women in a Zika, he has Rachel and Leah sitting in front of him, and could he do anything? The answer is no. Why not? Because they're both achayziku kasai. They're both sisters, there's nothing he can do. Says the Gemara, says Rav Avin, says Rav Elazar, in opinion of Beishamai right now, if they does Mimer, Kedushin Derabanan, it will allow the Zika, will allow the Isser to Leah to be pushed off. Comes along Rav Avin and says, let me bring you a Rayo. What's the Rayo? We have 4 brothers, 2 of them are married to 2 sisters, a case we spoke about so many times. What should the halacha be? Reuven and Shimon in this case should go and do chalitza. Why? Because each one has the same issue we just said a moment ago. Both Rachel and Leah are sisters. Rachel and Leah fall to Reuven. Rachel and Leah fall to Shimon. Could Reuven do Yibam? No. Could Shimon do Yibam? No. Why not? Because any time you're going to marry one of them, what are you essentially doing? You're marrying the the sister of the one that you have a connection to, and that is forbidden. But says the Gemara, according to what we just said, but according to, says the Brisa, but what if they do Yibum? What if Reuven and Shimon do the wrong thing? Lechatchila, they should have done Chalitza. But if they did Yibum, Yekaimu. Says Beishamai, they're allowed to stay married. If Reuven marries Rachel or Shimon marries Leah, through a incorrect action, they should not have done Yibum, but they did. Says the Gemara, they're allowed to stay married. But I asked the Gemara, why is that true? If a Mimer comes along, and what do we just say Mimer does? Mimer does a miracle. Mimer takes a woman which was Aser and makes her mutter. Mimer's Kedushin Derabanan, and it's a big machlek is how this works, but we'll go with the most simple understanding. Is that because the Mimer is Kedushin Derabanan, therefore the act of Erusin is what will allow Reuven to live with Rachel. What is the Isser of Achayis Zikukasei? What is the Isser right here in this story, right now? If we take a snapshot, and Reuven has Rachel and Leah in front of him, and Shimon has Rachel and Leah in front of him, what is Reuven and Shimon not allowed to do? Yibum. What is Yibum? Yibum is the full consummation of the marriage, the Nisu and the act of Tashmish and Bia between Reuven and one of these women and Shimon and one of these women. Why is that forbidden? Because that is a chayzikukasi. Says the Gemara, says Beishamai a chiddush, that if Reuven goes and does a Mimer Kedushin Derabanan, does Erusin Tanoim to Rachel, that will disregard and that will push away the Isra chayzikukasi to Leah, and then Reuven could go and sleep with Rachel. Then Reuven could go and live with Rachel. Because then when Reuven lives with Rachel, that act of nisui and that act of consummation of the marriage is no longer be'isr, because the original Kedushin Derabanan pushed away that isr. That is what should have happened if Mimer was a Kinyan Gomer. Says the Gemara, did Beishamai say this? No. What did Beishamai say? In Yekaimu, Yekayim. If you did Yibum, you could stay married. For the fact that Beishamai did not suggest a simple answer. Beishamai should have just said, Reuven, do Mimer. Shimon, do Mimer. That shows us that according to Beishamai, Mimer is not a Kinyan Gomer. Says the Gemara, beautiful Rayo. But Elamai, what's your recourse? How else are you going to explain the Mishnah? That doicha dechia gemura. You're going to explain that what does Mimer do? It's not a full-fledged kinyan. What Mimer does is it pushes away the other sister. So says the Gemara, then we have the same kasha. How are you going to answer up that kasha? Because regardless, you have to answer now. You're going to tell me, Mimer dehet teira So now we're going to get what everyone probably was wondering. Maybe there's a fundamental difference of what you're doing is mutter, what you're doing is aser. If the woman you're doing mimer to, you're allowed to do it to, then it will push it away. If not, not. So we can say the same thing. Therefore, it says the Gemara, there is no raya. With this picture in front of us, let's explain what the Gemara just said. The Gemara wanted to bring this as a raya for the fact that Beis Shammai did not suggest Ruvain to do mimer. And rather, what did it suggest? That if Ruvain did Yibum, it works. The Gemara's right, it must not be a Kinyan Gomer. Says the Gemara, no, will make a fundamental difference. That if the mimer was done beheter, this mimer is be'isser, because Ruvain is usser to Rachel Tachayzik Ukasei. We thought we could pull out a miracle. We thought that because mimer is only Kedushin in the Rabbanan, we thought it could come and it could supersede and precede the eventual Yibum and allow it to be mutter. Says the Gemara, no. Says the Gemara, when it's a situation of a heter, it will work, not a situation of isser, and that's the reason going back in our Mishnah. What Mimer is going to accomplish, Mimer will accomplish. It's no longer a chayzik ukasa, but we do not have a raya whether Beis Shammai holds that Mimer is a kinyan gomer or not. Says the Gemara. Now we have a second raya. We have a second lashon learning basically the same thing. Rav Ashi Masni Hachi says Rav Ashi, Rav Lazar Aimer. Don't think the Mimer is a kinyan gemura, and you don't even need chalitza. Rather, what does Mimer do? It just pushes away and leaves over an element, and that is what requires the eventual. Therefore, the Zika is still there, and that's what you're going to need, the chalitza. If you're going to need the chalitza, and Amar Avavin again, let's bring a raya. Beis Shammai Mekaymu Mekaymin lechatchila loy. V'yitzak adayt remember the Beis Shammai dechich gemura zayis Mimer yidcha zayis Mimer v'yidcha. Again, the same exact thing says the Gemara, that if it fully pushes away, let that be what Beis Shammai would suggest. But says the Gemara, but Beis Shammai doesn't say that. Yevamos de chazia lekulu chazia miksasa. Yevamos de chazia lekulu chazia miksasa. Basically, a very similar answer. Before we answered Mimer de Atira, Mimer de Isura, now the Gemara is saying it's whether she's chazi to everyone or not, and that is the two lashonos in Beis Shammai. So, Bai Rabba, with this we're going to conclude today's shir. Bai Rabba asks Rabba, Mimer leBeis Shammai nesuin isa iris and isa. We go a little bit more fundamental. What does a Mimer do according to Beis Shammai? Does it do nesuin or does it do irisin? Which, of course, this is almost a direct effect of the previous Gemara, because if the previous Gemara concluded that Mimer was a kinyan gemura, okay, that's really a machlokes whether we should say that. So let's just leave that, whether it has to do with the previous Gemara. But Rabba's Shaila is Mimer Nesuin or Eirisin, which of course we know, we keep on saying Mimer is Eirisin, but the Gemara now is asking fundamentally, what is the din according to Beis Shammai? Amarle Abaye says Abaye l'mayoch. So what's the nafkamina? If you're going to ask me, you want to know what does Mimer do to know if you did Mimer, do you inherit that woman? Are you allowed to become Tamid to her Kayin? If she is Nifter, are you allowed to be Mefer? Are you allowed to know her vows? Hash Arusa Ba'alma. So says Gemara, bring your raya. That can't be your shayla, because in a regular case of irisin, Tani Rav Chia teaches us Ishtai Arusa when you have a woman who you only did irisin, not nisuin, only did irisin Tanai in that first stage of marriage. Of course, was not Chazal. They used to split them up. But Chayni and so do we. She cannot be. She's not an aini. She cannot become tummy to you. Meisa, if she dies in a yard, she did not inherit her. Meisu, if he dies, Kovik Subasa, she gets her ksuba. If even by Erusin, a real Erusin, it doesn't work, you think by Mimer would work? Says the Gemara, what's your shayla? You Rabba asked, according to Beis Shammai, what does Mimer do? What must you be asking? You want to know what is the deal with regard to Nesir L'chapa? Nesuin Isa, v'lo by Mesir L'chapa. Does it do nisuin? And therefore you do not need Mesir L'chapa. What does it mean it does not need Mesir L'chapa? It means then the Yavon could go and effect the full Yibum, the consummation of the marriage, the nisuin, without being given over, could do it Bal Karcha, against her will. Or does it just do Eirisin Ubay Mesir L'chapa? Therefore you need her desire, she needs to acquiesce to do nisuin. So Amar Lei, but says Abaya, 1 second. We know this. We've been learning this last month. That how does Yibum work? One of the fundamental differences between Yibum and Nisuin, Yibum and regular Kedushin is what? Yibum can be done Bal Karcha. So says the Gemara, if you didn't do Mimer, save it says in the Torah, Bal Karcha. Without Mimer, you're allowed to do Yibum Bal Karcha. But Mimer, Mibai, of course you can do Bal Karcha. So Rabba, what is your shaila? Rabba, what is your shaila? Whether Beishamai, what Mimer does with regard to what halacha? So Amar Lei, Rabba responds, Shani Oimer, Kol Ha'isa Mimer b'yevimta paracham Mimenu Zikas Yevamin. You know what my shaila was? That when you do Mimer, the Zika disappears. V'chala Zikas Eirisin, and maybe now it's a regular Eirisin. So says Rabba, I now want to know, can you do it Bal Karcha? You're right. Normally, without Mimer, you could do even Bal Karcha. That's because there's a Zika, this connection between the Yavam and the Yavama. But says Rabba, maybe with Mimer, maybe with Eirisin, that Zika, that connection disappears. And if that connection disappears, maybe now you're like a regular Arusa. And therefore what? Therefore you need Das. Therefore you need Ratz, and she has to agree in order to do Nisuin. So what is the halacha? Answers the Gemara, Tashema. Shomeres Yavam bein Yavam Echad bein Shnei Yavamim. Rav Lazar Mer Yafer, Shomer Lechad v'lo Shnayim. What is the din of Afaris the Dharma, annulling the vows? And we'll finish with this. Whether it's 1 or 2 Yavamim, Rav Lazar says you could be made for the Nadarim. Rav Yeshua says Lechad v'lo Shnayim. No, only 1 Yavam could be made for the Nadarim, not 2. Rav Kiva Mer Lo Lechad v'lo Shnayim. No one could. We try to figure out what is this price they're talking about. Rav Kiva's Aver Ein Zika. According to Rav Kiva, there's no connection. Afil Lechad, and therefore you cannot annul the vow until you actually marry. You're talking about a shemeres yavam. So that is a waiting yibam. Rav Yeshua, according to Rav Yeshua, I understand. Lachad yesh zika l'trein zika. There's 1 zika when there's 1 yavam. There's not a zika when there's 2 yavam, and therefore you could be made from the nadarim if you're waiting 2 yibam. Then there's only 1 potential person, but not if there is 2. El Rav Lazar neheinami d'ksav yesh zika. I understand that according to Rav Lazar we hold yesh zika, but bishlam lachad mefer el l'trei amai. According to Rav Lazar, why are 2 people allowed to be mefer in the nedarim? Says the Gemara of Amar Rav Ami, and Rav Ami explains Halcha b'maya askina gon da'avid ba Mimer u'beishamai Tomer Mimer koine kinyin gomer. So says the Gemara, now we have a Rayo. If you can tell me it doesn't nisuin, I understand it's made for the nedarim. But if only does Eirisin, how could it be made for the nedarim? And there Vatanan Naira Muras of your brother if you're in the Darel, and therefore it must be doesn't nisuin. We'll finish the Gemara tomorrow, but says the Gemara Rabba Shailu, we can answer from this price according to Rav Lazar that it must be it does nisuin.